Welcome to today's deep dive. If you've been, hunting for the secret psychological architecture behind why certain stories just completely consume us, you are definitely in the right place today.
Oh, absolutely. We have a really fascinating one for you.
We do. Our mission today is to explore how authors deconstruct the mechanics of the human psyche and the incredibly heavy burden of unspoken truths.
Right.
We're basing this on a really fascinating analytical piece we've been reviewing titled Shadows of the Psyche, Jawhar versus Michaelides. And the source material compares two incredibly distinct thrillers.
Yeah, on one hand, you have Alex Michaelides' massive global bestseller, The Silent Patient.
Right. And on the other, Ghassan Jawhar's deeply unconventional novel, The Man Who Vanished. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why these books have such a grip on you as a reader, think about how we normally judge a person's character.
Right, we look at their actions.
Exactly. We look at what they do in the light. It's almost like watching an actor on a brightly lit stage. You see their expressions, you hear their dialogue, you watch how they treat the other actors. That social performance is just completely out in the open.
What's fascinating here is that both of these novels basically throw a giant wrench into that exact dynamic.
Yeah, they really do.
They share this profound obsession with exploring the shadow self. They want to know what happens when someone cuts the power to that stage.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. If the lights go pitch black and that actor realizes no one in the audience can see them anymore, do they keep playing the hero? The plot of each book is wildly different, but they are both fundamentally trying to strip away the polite, acceptable surface of their characters.
Just to examine the raw, unobserved machinery humming underneath.
Exactly.
And the analysis points out that they expose that machinery in completely opposite ways, starting from the very foundation, like the pacing and the style.
Yeah.
Because you can't just tell a reader a character is unraveling, right? You have to make the reader feel it.
You have to put them in that headspace, yeah.
Right. So the source breaks down how Michaelides builds this through a very clinical, contemporary style. I mean, The Silent Patient uses forensic psychology and a dual narrative.
You're constantly bouncing between a present-day investigation and these old diary entries.
Exactly. And it's rated in the source metrics with a pacing of 7.5 out of 10.
And, that 7.5 isn't a knock against the book at all. It actually represents a very deliberate, methodical burn.
Right. It's intentional.
Very intentional. Michaelides is trapping the reader in a highly structured environment. Because the protagonist, Alicia, she refuses to speak after allegedly committing a horrific crime, so the narrative has to act like an investigation.
Yeah, it's slow.
Yeah.
Because you are literally sifting through the wreckage of a mind that is already shattered.
Precisely. The psychological trap here is the feeling of inevitability. You feel like you are walking down this long, sterile hallway toward a devastating truth that has already happened. You can't change it, you just have to uncover it.
Which is, frankly, a completely different kind of dread than what Ghassan Jawhar is doing in The Man Who Vanished.
Oh, completely different.
The analysis describes Jawhar's style as poetry and prose, flowing fluidly between gentle and sharp. And the pacing is rated higher, actually, at an 8.5 out of 10.
Because it relies on this rapid cinematic momentum.
Right. You are jumping between these high-stakes missions in Paris, Washington, D.C., and Luxor.
Right.
But the detail that really made me pause is the originality score. It gets a massive 9.5 out of 10 because Jawhar is mashing up ancient Egyptian history with modern techno-espionage.
Which sounds totally wild on paper.
Right. I was struggling to see how that actually works. I mean, ancient Luxor and modern digital surveillance seem like they belong in two completely different genres.
They do. It sounds contradictory until you look at the mechanism Jawhar uses to bridge them. And this comes directly from his real-life background in telecommunications.
Okay.
The source highlights this specific detail because his background infuses the entire narrative with a distinctive lens on surveillance.
I read that part, but I actually needed to push back on it a little.
Yeah.
Like, how does working in telecom translate to writing a psychological thriller? That feels like a massive leap from, routing IT cables to writing Jason Bourne.
Well, think about what a telecommunications network actually is on a conceptual level.
Okay.
It is the invisible routing of human lives. Someone with a deep background in telecom understands that every text, every movement, every financial transaction, it's just a ping on a cell tower or a packet of data.
Wow, yeah.
Jawhar realizes that whoever controls that data flow is essentially an invisible. He takes that real-world technical architecture and maps it right onto his protagonist's psychological state.
Oh, I see.
So the ancient Egyptian elements, which often deal with the afterlife and, absolute unchecked power, they parallel this modern ability to be everywhere and see everything without ever being seen.
That is wild. So if Michaelides is like a meticulous forensic surgeon using a scalpel in a sterile room, Jawhar sounds more like a chaotic but brilliant orchestra conductor.
Yes, that is a fantastic analogy, and the expert analysis really emphasizes why this matters. The pacing dictates the reader's psychological state.
Right.
The slow dread of Michaelides builds a sense of inevitability, while Jawhar uses that breakneck techno-espionage to induce paranoia and disorientation.
So you aren't walking down a hallway, you are caught in a current, constantly looking over your shoulder because you know the invisible network is tracking you.
Exactly. And that paranoia requires a completely different set of tools to communicate to the reader, which is why the source material's breakdown of sensory storytelling in these two books is so critical.
Sensory storytelling, yeah.
Right. Both authors have protagonists who either cannot or will not communicate their truth through normal dialogue. So they have to rely on an artistic medium as a surrogate for the characters' hidden internal states.
Right, because in The Silent Patient, the sensory immersion is rated at a 7.0 out of 10, and it relies heavily on visual literacy.
Yes. Alicia's a painter.
Since she won't talk to the investigator, the reader is basically forced to rely on visual clues in her artwork, right? The specific colors she chooses and how they tie into literary references to the Greek tragedy Alcestis.
And visual literacy is essentially a cognitive puzzle. The author is asking you to engage your intellect.
You have to figure it out.
Right. You look at a painting described in the text, you analyze its composition, you map it against the myth of Alcestis, which, by the way, is about a woman who sacrifices herself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then you deduce the hidden meaning. The reader is actively working to decode the visual information.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Jawhar just throws that cognitive puzzle completely out the window.
He really does.
The Man Who Vanished relies on olfactory literacy, the sense of smell. His sensory immersion scores an incredible 9.5 out of 10 because he treats scent as an actual functional language where memory and identity are mapped.
It's so unique.
It is. The analysis notes that the scent of birch tar is used repeatedly to identify danger, while white musk signals redemption. And I have to admit, I was completely baffled by this at first.
How so?
Well, in a mystery or a thriller, we are so trained to look for visual clues. You know, a hidden safe behind a painting, a bloody footprint, a coded text message. How do you write a scent into a fast-paced espionage thriller without it completely grinding the plot to a halt?
It works because of human biology.
Biology.
Yeah. The olfactory bulb in the brain has direct, unmediated connections to the amygdala and the hippocampus. Those are the areas responsible for emotion and memory.
Okay.
It's actually the only one of our senses that bypasses the thalamus, which is the brain's logical routing center.
Wait, really? It bypasses logic entirely.
Completely.
It's the difference between seeing a photograph of a house fire and sitting in your living room and suddenly smelling smoke.
Yeah, exactly.
The photograph is information you have to process. The smell of smoke is an immediate physical threat. Your heart rate spikes before you've even formed a conscious thought.
That is the exact mechanism Jawhar is exploiting. Perfumery in his work and painting in Michaelides' work are vital because they allow the authors to express complex trauma when words completely fail.
Because they just can't say it.
Right. When a character is too broken to speak, or when speaking would literally destroy them or their mission, they project their reality into the physical paint on a canvas or the volatile structure of a fragrance.
It's like a way of screaming without making a sound. And that idea of being trapped in your own head, unable to just say what is happening to you, that transitions perfectly into the core theme the source identifies in both works.
Yes, spectral loneliness.
Right, spectral loneliness. Now, I have to be honest, when I first read that term, I kind of rolled my eyes a bit.
It does sound a bit dramatic.
It sounds like something a pretentious literary critic made up to describe a character looking out a rainy window. You know, is this a real, tangible, psychological state they are exploring, or just a fancy way of saying the characters are sad?
It sounds poetic, for sure, but it describes a very raw, documented psychological degradation. We are inherently social animals. Our baseline reality, our morality, our sense of self, these are all maintained by our connections to the pack.
Right, our social circles.
Exactly. Spectral loneliness captures the specific isolation of someone who has been physically or emotionally severed from humanity. They literally become a ghost in their own life.
Wow.
The degradation happens because without that feedback loop of human connection, the mind begins to warp.
So they are both exploring characters trapped behind these impenetrable walls. But the analysis makes it clear that the kind of wall is entirely different.
Yes, very different.
Because Michaelides focuses on the breaking point of the mind. He's exploring deep-seated trauma, the literal silence of a victim who has endured something unspeakable, and of course the deeply obsessive nature of the therapist trying to fix her. The isolation is a defense mechanism.
Jawhar, however, approaches spectral loneliness not as a defense mechanism, but as a byproduct of power.
Right.
The man who vanished creates what the source calls a moral laboratory. He is testing human integrity when all social accountability is removed. This ties directly back to that telecom surveillance theme we were talking about.
Yeah, the source outlines this incredible internal civil war happening inside Jawhar's protagonist. On one side, he has this deep devotion to his family. That's his grounding wire.
His tether to reality.
Exactly. But on the other side, because of his skills and his unseen vantage point, he has what the text calls the voyeur's thrill of absolute power. He operates entirely in the shadows.
And the moral laboratory is testing that.
Right. He is exploring what happens when a man is permitted to become a lesser man simply because no one is watching him do it.
And that lack of observation is exactly what degrades his ethics. This is why Jawhar's protagonist is an explicitly unreliable viewpoint.
Ah, okay.
In a typical thriller, you generally trust that the protagonist, however flawed, is striving for the right outcome. You trust their baseline morality. But in a moral laboratory, those societal guardrails are just gone.
Because no one is looking.
Exactly. Without the threat of being caught, without the judgment of peers, the voyeur's thrill begins to corrode that baseline decency. The reader starts to realize they cannot trust the very mind they're inhabiting.
So what does this all mean if we bring it back to that opening idea of the actor on the stage?
The lit stage, right?
Yeah, the spotlight is on, the audience is clapping, we all know how to behave. Jawhar's moral laboratory is just the stage after the theater shuts down. It asks you directly what defines your character when the spotlight is turned off and the audience goes home.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this discomfort is exactly why both novels score a highly impressive 9.0 out of 10 in psychological depth.
That's a huge score.
It really is. They function as a moral mirror. They don't just want to entertain you with a twist. They want to challenge your internal true north.
Your internal true north, like the compass inside your head that points to good or right.
Yes. Both books actively mess with the magnetic field around that compass. The Silent Patient forces you to question your assumptions about who is the victim and who is the savior, completely blurring the lines between sanity and madness.
And Jawhar does something equally unsettling. As the source summarizes, he effectively replaces the silence of the patient with the invisibility of the hunter.
Invisibility of the hunter.
Yeah. Think about the mechanics of that phrase. Being unseen isn't just a passive state of hiding. In Jawhar's world, it's a predatory state. It transforms you from prey into a predator, just by virtue of not being observed.
You shed your vulnerability, but you also shed your humanity.
Exactly. And the tension for the reader is watching that transformation happen to the protagonist while silently wondering, if I had that kind of invisibility, would my compass hold true? Or would I let myself become a lesser person?
Right. It forces you to look inward.
It really does. So, to distill everything we've pulled from these sources today, if you're someone who loved the trauma, the twists, and the slow psychological unraveling of the silent patient, Jawhar's The Man Who Vanished offers a similarly gripping descent.
It just uses a radically different vehicle to get you there.
Right. Instead of a sterile forensic examination of trauma and visual clues, you are plunged into this high-octane, sensory-rich, techno-espionage world where you are navigating by scent and paranoia. But make no mistake, both of them are going to seriously test your internal true north.
This raises an important question, though, that builds on the mechanics we've discussed today.
Yeah.
The analysis heavily emphasized Jawhar's focus on surveillance and the voyeur's thrill of absolute power when no one is watching.
Right. The invisible data networks.
Yeah. Consider the digital architecture we interact with every single day. Our screens, our smartphones, our anonymous online profiles.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In a very real sense, modern technology grants all of us a degree of that exact invisibility Jawhar writes about. It gives us a daily dose of that voyeur's thrill. We can observe others constantly without being seen. We can comment, act, and scroll without any immediate physical accountability.
Wait, are you suggesting we are already in the laboratory?
I am asking if our digital anonymity is slowly placing all of us into Jawhar's moral laboratory. Every single time you go online, unseen, behind a screen name or blank avatar, are you actively being tested? Are we, as a society, being given the permission day by day to become a lesser person simply because the physical spotlight is off?
Man, that is going to fundamentally change how I look at my phone. Are we the polite actor on the brightly lit stage, or are we the predator in the pitch black theater the second the screen goes dark?
Something to think about.
I really want you to mull that over. The next time you log into a device and realize nobody is watching you, check where your internal true north is pointing. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the shadows of the psyche. It's been an incredible journey unpacking this material with you. Keep questioning the things you read. Keep an eye on that moral compass, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.